my personal Facebook page. And what I do is I help people flourish and unleash their potential for increasing their well-being through positive psychology, self-coaching, and transformational psychology. You can find out more about me at lisanellercoaching.com. This is my first creative expression through the medium of live video for this topic, and I'm excited to have a very special guest today. We're going to talk about navigating emotional waters in crisis and beyond. So please offer your comments and questions and suggestions for other topics that you might want to learn about anytime during this recording, okay? So I'm going to introduce our guest. Lauren Dixon is a licensed professional counselor in the state of Arizona. She has been practicing for several years, has her independent license, and is currently on staff in the student care department of Grand Canyon University. She has a bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Arizona and a master's degree in professional counseling from Grand Canyon University. Lauren specializes in issues surrounding trauma and uses a variety of methods for helping people cope with life. She is also a certified yoga teacher and a violinist who performs at weddings and other events. And she does some recording work for other artists. So on my Facebook page, if you scroll down a little, you'll see the recent song by her friend Amelia Joyce, who is currently competing in American Idol. The strings in the background were played by Lauren. By the way, Lauren is my daughter and someone I have a lot of respect for because she works hard and she loves hard. Lauren and I are both committed to and passionate about helping others with their mental health, me as a life coach, and her as a counselor. So without further ado, welcome, Lauren.
Thank you. Excited to be here, excited to talk about emotions and all the crazy things going on in life right now.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you about this because I know you and I have been talking a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. And we are talking about emotions. We're talking about how to navigate them now in particular and in the future. And as we've been discussing, there is a wide range of emotion, which we can experience from day to day and even within one day. And I love how you had on your Facebook page the other day that graphic where you had different colored hearts that corresponded to different feelings. And for example, one was like, I'm doing really great. I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing okay. I'm starting to struggle. And I'm having a really hard time. And then all the way to, I need to reach out for support. So I thought that was a great way to get the conversation started. That we do have emotions and we have feelings, and they may be more intensified right now, given the what I call the pandemic pandemonium in which we find ourselves today. So can you help us take a look at some of the primary emotions and how they inform us?
Yeah, so obviously being a therapist, emotions are something that I talk about a lot. And I think I've found particularly in my work with clients that our Western culture tends to actually be very emotionally illiterate, not so much in the sense that we don't feel things very strongly or even recognize that we're feeling things, but in the sense that we're not very well trained at how to put names and labels to what it is we're feeling. And one of the other kind of interesting things I've noticed, especially just in our culture, is that we tend to associate our feelings more so with thoughts or with behaviors rather than with values and needs, which is kind of an interesting thing because when we start to look at emotional literacy and what our primary emotions actually are and what emotions are designed to do for us as humans, even though we associate them with the behaviors that we tend to choose or to react in response to our emotions, the emotions themselves are much more connected to things that we value and needs that we have. So something I've heard people say a lot is like, oh, that, that's just in my head, or that's just in your head, or that's something that, I'm feeling, but it's not something we associate with our bodies and with actual needs that connect to our bodies. But it's interesting because when we look at actually the science of emotion and how we experience that as biological beings, emotion is just registered sensation in the physical body. So in the same way that we would feel a sensation of hunger that lets us know you have a need to eat, or a sensation of, feeling very sleepy and drowsy that lets us know you have a need to restore your energy. Our emotions also really are meant to direct us toward things that we need. So a model that a lot of kind of originated with therapist researcher Pia Melody poses that there's 8 core emotions. So there's a lot that's really helpful about our English language and being able to use 1,000 different words to describe how we're feeling. But I think it also traps us up and is part of the problem in mixing up our feelings with our thoughts or our behaviors. So we say things like, I feel like you don't care about me, or I feel like this isn't fair, rather than saying, I feel shame and disconnection, or I feel anger because something that I care about feels blocked or violated. So just to sort of talk about some of the labels that can be really helpful to us, especially in a time like this where we're feeling so many different things, even within the span of an hour. We could have a really great FaceTime call with our best friend or a family member and be experiencing a lot of joy and a lot of connection. And then we can hang up and look at how many hours are left in the day and start feeling pain and depression or frustration and anger. So the 3 emotions that as humans we tend to like a little bit more or be more comfortable with, we call joy, love, and passion. So joy when we're celebrating something, love when we really feel connected to others or to ourselves or to our faith. And passion is really about being connected with our values and productivity and being able to pursue goals that we are interested in and that feel important to us. But then we get into the other 5 emotions that we tend to be less comfortable with and have a harder time naming. Fear is one of the really big ones. It has kind of a whole center of the brain all to itself that regulates a lot of our nervous system. And fear is really about risk. So anytime that the brain picks up, hey, something is at risk, or a negative outcome, we register that. And we can experience that as stress, as anxiety, as worry. There's obviously a lot of that going on right now with the pandemic, just a lot of fear of, am I going to stay healthy? Are the people that I love going to stay healthy? Am I going to have toilet paper when I need it? Those kinds of things. And then anger, this is an interesting one. I noticed that we tend to really associate with behavior. We think of anger as either hostility, aggression, and yelling, or as stonewalling and passivity and like shutting down. But really, anger is just about the things that we value, the goals that we have, and when one of those values or goals feels violated or blocked in some way. So, if I have a goal I'm a vegetarian and I go to the store to buy eggs and beans, 2 of the staple things that I eat as a vegetarian, and the shelves are cleared, it makes sense that I feel some level of anger because that goal that I went with is being blocked in that moment. But because we associate it more behaviorally, we have a tendency either to like immediately act out or to try to shut it down, rather than just acknowledging like, yeah, this was a value that felt violated. Pain is also one that a lot of us are experiencing right now, just sadness, grief, disappointment. Those things fall under this category of pain. It's an emotion that we feel when we experience loss. So there's a lot that is being lost in our world today. People are losing celebrations, they're losing their jobs, their income, their routines, their regular connections with others. And so that's a really, really difficult one for us because pain of our emotions is the one where we tend to feel the least amount of control. And so we shift a lot of times away from pain towards anger, fear, or the other 2 I haven't talked about yet, guilt and shame. Guilt is also really an interesting one, I think, in this time, because we tend to recognize that a little bit more obviously when we transgress one of our own values. So if I value honesty and I tell a lie, I feel guilty. It's kind of our Jiminy Cricket conscience emotion. But it's also something that we feel sometimes when it's not necessarily something we could have controlled, we experience guilt in the form of, I wish that I would have, could have, should have, something I think should have been different. It should have been in my control. So if I would have just stocked up on toilet paper when this craze started, then maybe I wouldn't be experiencing the loss of not having toilet paper right now. Or if I would have just known that, you know, this isn't the time to be in the market for a house, or whatever the things are, the losses that we're experiencing. Guilt is one of the emotions that we shift to sort of self-blame versus anger, where we externalize and blame other people. And then shame is an interesting one too. It's different from guilt in the sense that it's less about our behaviors and it's more about our identity, our sense of self. One of my favorite definitions of shame is that it's the fear of like there's something uniquely and permanently defective about me that is going to prevent you or somebody else from wanting to be in connection with me. So that's a lot of information. But I think if I can boil that down, just starting to look at when I am feeling something, can I put a label to what that feeling is, and then look at what is the value or the need before I immediately look at what's going to be the reaction, or do I need to, you know, feel shame about feeling this emotion? If that makes sense.
Yes, that does make sense. You said earlier that that emotion is sort of like a feeling in the body. So you could call it like a vibration, right? Like it's something that you literally feel. And I wanted you to talk about, pardon me?
Sensation.
Yeah. Sensation. Yeah. Okay. So it's a sensation. I want to talk about adaptability. So like, how can we navigate these emotions? And I have heard typically that we do one of three things with our emotions. So we either avoid them altogether, or we try to. I don't know that you can avoid them completely, but we avoid dealing with them. And we do resist them. So we kind of, when we start to feel that sensation in the body, we know it comes from a deeper psychological place, I think, but maybe we don't know that. So we resist them, or we simply react without really processing what's going on. So can you speak to how we can better adapt to these emotions and to our situation, so it will help us, you know, like not only now, but in the future? And how can we use this information on emotions to maintain harmony versus chaos?
Yeah, so I think in response to the three ways you described that people often do relate with their emotions or interact with their emotions, because most of us have not learned this emotional literacy, and we don't necessarily know when I'm feeling something, this is the value or the need to investigate and to express or communicate about. What happens instead is that we think, in order to stay safe, in order to minimize risk, in order to preserve harmony, I need to get away from this emotion. And some of us tend to be more on the controlled end of the spectrum, where it's like we maybe know that we're feeling things, but we use logic to just sort of shut that down or not talk about it. Some of us tend to be more on a passive place, where we just sort of like head in the sand strategy, like it's fine, like it's not a big deal. And then some of us are more on the reactive side, as you use that word, meaning that we don't really take any pause to think about it. It's just, I'm angry, I'm yelling, or I'm fearful, I'm having a panic attack, I'm in pain, I'm crying and hyperventilating. We feel very just flooded, is kind of us to a different part of the brain, where we're not having a choice to choose how we want to respond anymore. We're just reacting. So the key as we increase emotional literacy is to embrace mindfulness and self-awareness. So really being able to take a pause, and instead of going to whatever that autopilot response is for us, to actually stop and check out, what is the emotion that I'm feeling right now, and what is the need or the value underneath that. So if I'm feeling a lot of fear, is that because, you know, the thing that's at risk is my health or my family's health? Well, now for me to do, once I've noticed that, what's actually in my control versus what's not in my control. So the things that are not in my control, can I help my body to just sort of relax with that as much as possible? And then the things that are in my control, like washing my hands and avoiding public places, can I be connected to that value? And that way I have a mindful response to the emotion. So I think really, and for those who don't know, mindfulness is, I think, two of my favorite definitions of that. One is just, it's allowing the mind to be so full of the present moment, that we're not distracted by thoughts, experiences of the past, thoughts or worries of the future. We're just really present with like, what is real? What is the thing I feel? What is the thing that I value? And what is in my control? What's not? How do I want to proceed? Rather than sort of responding from the past, where maybe every time I've ever felt this emotion, my go-to response is to try to control everything around me, or to yell at everybody else, or to, you know, barricade myself and hide away from all of the problems. So really just being in the present with what's real. And then I think the other definition that I love of mindfulness is that is really more of a reminder. It's not about controlling our thoughts and feelings, but it's about becoming free from our thoughts and feelings controlling us. So rather than being afraid that this feeling is going to come up or that this feeling is going to be present, I can just instead be present with it, and it's not necessarily going to control or dictate my reaction. I can have that feeling and acknowledge that that is my experience, given the fact that I can't control all things. I might know what I need, and I might not be able to get that need met, but once I kind of acknowledge the reality of that, I can respond in a helpful way rather than reacting, which is this.
Yeah, very good. So being mindful, staying present, really kind of choosing to maintain that harmony. That would be for me, my biggest, excuse me, my biggest motivation is peace and harmony. So I really value that. And so I like to try to really pay attention to what I'm feeling and feel it, allow myself to feel it. And I think you've spoken about that before, like validating your feelings, right? I mean, just even acknowledging that they're there. Is that helpful? Do you find that to be helpful?
Yeah, I find it to be very helpful. And one of the cool things about validating and acknowledging our feelings is that it actually combats the emotion of shame, which we experience a lot of times when we think I shouldn't be feeling this, or it's not acceptable if I'm feeling this. And so I think when we're able to validate our feelings, when we can understand for this feeling, this is the need or the value that tends to go with that, even if we can't get that need or value met, there is something very powerful about being able to be known and to express that to another person. To be able to say, hey, I feel really scared right now because there's a lot of unknown. We don't know week to week what life is going to look like. And it's not that I need somebody to fix that for me or to offer me a solution, but to be able to share that and have, my own validation, but also to receive that from other people who can be like, yeah, it makes sense that you feel that way. A lot of us are living in close quarters with our partners, our family members, roommates. And I think during a time like this, there's going to be a lot of stress and problems that we can't necessarily solve for each other. But we can seek to really express, this is the thing I'm feeling, and this is my value, or this is my desire. And just expressing it allows us to increase intimacy and to know each other better.
I love that. Can you just speak a moment? I don't know. I'm guessing loneliness is an emotion. And I spoke with someone this morning, very dear to me. So that's under pain. Yeah. So there are a lot of people out there that are lonely right now, elderly people who are shut in their apartments and things like that. And that's very difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
So what would be some homework that you might offer someone to help them regulate their emotions?
Yeah. I think mindfulness practice in the sense of pausing frequently to be curious about which emotion am I feeling, and to know that we can feel more than one at the same time. So our brains tend to work in a very linear fashion, in like an either or. I can be happy or I can be sad. And the reality is that when I pause and am mindful about what am I feeling in this moment, I might notice that I feel really grateful that I still have the ability to connect with people over social media, over FaceTime, over the phone. So I feel joy, I feel love and connection. I still can be connected to passion because, man, all this extra time that I have now, I can learn new techniques on the violin, and I can practice more yoga, and I can spend more time in meditation and reading and things like that. So I can feel all of those comfortable feelings. And I might notice at the same time that I feel really anxious and, frustrated because I don't know how long all of this is going to last for. And as somebody who values planning, that's a value that's being blocked for me right now in a lot of ways. And so I think the practice of being mindful is a really wonderful, not even just homework, but like a constant practice to reflect on, and to use those 8 core emotion words. I know helps me so much to try to narrow it down. Am I feeling joy, love, passion, anger, fear, pain, guilt, and or shame? And so just being able to identify, okay, what's the thing I'm feeling? And then from that place looking at, okay, well, if I feel fear, what's at risk? If I feel anger, what's the goal that's being blocked? If I feel pain, what's the thing that has been lost, and what's the reality of how I'm going to have to adjust to life differently right now with that thing being lost? If I'm feeling guilt, what actually is within my control? Is there anything that I can do differently? Or is it going to be more helpful for me to acknowledge pain about the things I can't control? If I'm feeling shame, I need connection. So can I reach out to somebody else and let them know what I'm experiencing and practice vulnerability in that? So whether you do that practice just in still moments of, I'm going to take a second and kind of check in with my body, and of those 8 emotions, start to understand and reflect on what I'm feeling. Some of us do this really well in conversation with safe supports. Some of us do this really well through journaling and being able to sort of visualize our thoughts and feelings in that way. But just the practice of stopping, pausing, and labeling is really helpful.
What about writing down values and needs? Like just even taking the time to investigate your own values and your own needs just by writing that down on paper. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know what all the values are in the world, you can certainly research that on Google, right? You could just go, what are values? What kind of values? And then see what resonates with you. Because I'm sure there are lists of values, like there is a book of emotions. This is the dictionary of emotions, and look how thick it is, so there's a lot of information out there about this, but there's so much more to cover, I think, in terms of strategies for improving mental health and well-being. And I believe we will continue the conversation. Mm-hmm. In the meantime, please list your questions and suggestions for topics that you'd like to learn more about with regard to mental health and well-being. And I'll bring Lauren back, and we'll go into other ways in which we can cope in the world. So Lauren, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. I think it's really going to be helpful. At least it's helpful to me to be reminded of all the emotions. And I will post those 8 main emotions underneath, like show notes, like underneath this video. So thanks, Lauren. And now is a good time as any, right, to reinvent your life. So in fact, you might be wondering, like, now what? You know, my life is changing so drastically. Do I, you know, if things were to go back to normal tomorrow, would I still do the same thing? Or am I reassessing my life, and do I have a different vision for my life? So if you truly want to investigate that, just head over to reinventionlifecoach.com and get my free video series on how to get started doing that. In the meantime, have fun examining your emotions and pausing and listening and writing those values and needs down and learning how to navigate them so you feel better more of the time. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, thank you, Lauren, and we'll see you next time.